What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue and I hope you're all doing well today. For today's video, I have an overview and breakdown of one of the latest PTR raid test bosses, the Guardian of the First Ones. Quite an ominous name and it's a pretty cool fight to boot. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now let's take a peek at some early raid footage. While I do go over some strategy and mechanics of this encounter, this is still really early in the PTR cycle, so I wouldn't consider this an official raid guide just yet. I will put together a revised one once we're a bit closer to official patch launch day. This video will mainly cover all the mechanics, how you deal with them, and what I think of the fight and difficulty of it as a whole. If I were to compare this to any recent raid bosses, then Sludge Fist is the first one that comes to mind, as the fight will most likely be a DPS and potentially a healing check as well, with a very limited amount of time and a pseudo-enrage effect. Other than a few moves in particular feeling they hit just a little too hard, I think this will be a pretty engaging fight for progression. So the basic premise behind this fight is that there's only one target, the Guardian of the First Ones, and it has an energy bar. This energy bar will slowly drop down throughout the fight, and if it reaches 0, it will cause a move called Purging Protocol. This will do heavy, pulsing arcane damage every 5 or so seconds, and every time the cast goes off, it will increase the damage of this move by 100%. Basically, yeah, this can't go off repeatedly or it'll almost be an instant wipe. To keep the boss from running out of energy, there are 3 energy cores throughout the boss room. The boss will start absorbing energy from a core once it's brought close to it, which will activate the core's radiant energy. While radiant energy is active, there will be a big circle on the ground and will pulse a huge amount of unstable energy damage per second. To counter that huge AoE pulsing hit, all players need to stand in the glowing circle around the energy core, as this will reduce the damage taken from the unstable energy by 90%. Eventually though, the core will become depleted of energy. When this occurs, a Meltdown cast will occur, and if you're within 15 yards of the core when it explodes, you will take an absurd amount of arcane damage, like over 50,000. If you're more than 15 yards away, it'll hit for about half of that. As I'm sure you can already imagine, this is a lot of damage going out from basically every move, hence why it's such a healing intensive fight. You also only have 3 energy cores to use, which is where the DPS check portion of the fight is implemented as well, because once you run out of cores, you'll have to tunnel the Guardian as hard as possible before too many stacks of Purging Protocol go out. Besides the energy bar mechanic which dictates the pacing of the entire fight, the Guardian itself has a number of potent moves to deal with. The tanks will have to deal with a 2-part attack called Elimination pattern. This is kinda like the move from Grong in Battle for Dazar'alor, so you'll need to taunt swap in between these 2 hits. The first hit is called Shatter, which deals a large physical damage hit, but then it makes you take 100% increased physical damage for 40 seconds. The second hit, Obliterate, is an even larger physical hit, so after Shatter, a taunt swap will have to occur. For the rest of us non-tanks, the Guardian will randomly cast Disintegration. This is a huge beam attack that leaves a line on the ground. Getting hit by this does a hefty amount of damage, stuns you, and puts a nasty arcane damage over time effect on you as well. The attack goes off pretty quickly, so you probably don't have enough time to channel that Chaos Bolt or whatever caster things you might be planning on, so just move immediately if you're in the line of fire. There is also Threat Neutralization, which makes the Guardian mark a few random people with a big glowy circle. Any players caught in this circle when it goes off will take a decent chunk of damage, so pretty simple for people who are marked to just move away from everyone else. Lastly, and probably the only truly annoying move of this boss fight, is Form Sentry. The Guardian will summon these floating death orbs that shoot at a few players at a time, dealing almost 10,000 damage every half second to the random players being hit. The boss will summon multiple of these throughout the fight, so the unpredictable damage can be quite threatening to squishier DPS. Don't stand near these sentries, by the way, as they put out a suppression field that pacifies anyone near them and deals a tiny bit of damage, but the real issue is being pacified. What we found by the end of our testing is to tank the boss basically at the entrance of the encounter room, but slightly adjacent to one of the energy cores. Once he reached 0 energy, we'd let the first Purging Protocol cast go off, since if it's only one hit then it doesn't hit too hard. We did this to try and maximize the amount of time that we wouldn't be wasting our energy cores. Once that first cast went off though, the tank would move the Guardian to a core, which seemed to reset his stacking Purging Protocol buff, so the subsequent ones at later pillars won't be buffed. The majority of the group would then stand on the side of the radiant energy field that's closest to the boss, so that way anyone who got marked with threat neutralization could move to the back of the energy field so we could avoid anyone getting overlapped and killed, since leaving the energy field means huge ticking damage that would probably kill most anyone in a couple seconds. Once the energy core was depleted, we'd move to the center of the room and use some raid-wide healing or damage mitigations, and then basically repeat this process over and over. As a rogue, thankfully, we can feint the Meltdown cast, which shaves off a lot of damage taken, and Cloak of Shadow seems to work on virtually everything in this fight, which is really nice. We managed to get pretty close to a kill, and I think this strategy worked really nicely overall. Maybe some better callouts for cooldowns or when personals need to be used, but overall, for being in a pug, it was a pretty easy fight to learn that just requires dealing a whole lot of damage and healing a whole lot of damage and using your cooldowns well. I'd say this is a much more melee-friendly fight than Sludge Fist, which was always one of my larger complaints with that encounter, and having our defensives as rogues being really potent here is really nice. The fight did feel just a little bit overtuned in terms of sheer amount of damage that the moves dealt, though it could also just be due to not getting correct healing cooldown rotations or people not using their defensives well enough to mitigate things. The sentries are a real hassle though, since they are purely random damage dealt and they can hit really hard. Alright folks, that's all for this breakdown of the Guardian of the First One's raid encounter from this PTR raid testing. Honestly, it'll be a pretty tough progression fight I think when we're first starting out, but I don't think it'll be impossible, because even in a group without Discord or voice or any real communication and we just saw the fight for the first time ever that day, we got some really clean pulls in, and with a little bit more time we probably could have even downed it. So hopefully this information proves useful to you, and in the future I'll be putting together an actual raid guide, so that'll be something to look forward to once we're closer to patch 9.1's launch. If this video did prove useful to you, then please consider leaving a like, a comment, or maybe even subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. It's all tremendously appreciated, and any support is always awesome. And as always, my gratitude to all of my viewers, and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.